I am Jackie Shelton. I'm the Vice President of Public Relations at the Estipona Group. We are an advertising, communications, marketing firm that's celebrating our 28th anniversary this year. We've been virtual since 2012. So when COVID happened, it wasn't as big of a disruption for us, but it was still a disruption because we normally do meet in person sometimes, and we weren't able to do that. So one of the things, we've been talking about crisis communications forever, and we talk to our clients about planning, what could go wrong? What could go wrong in your business? And if it does go wrong, what are we going to say about it? And most people don't ever want to talk about this because it's kind of like if I plan my will or my burial arrangement, somehow maybe I'll die. But what I realized when I planned my will and my burial arrangements, I didn't have to think about it anymore because I knew it was done. And it's the same thing with this. If you go through and you think about what could go wrong in your business, one, it might be something you can fix ahead of time. If you think, well, if we flood, then that's going to be in danger. Well, go ahead and address that if there's a chance that you might flood. But also, if it does go wrong, so if something, you have a sexual harassment suit or something like that, you're prepared for it. So you're not scrambling. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about crisis communication, crisis, what it is, what could go wrong. I am going to ask you to share your own stories. If you've either gone through a crisis or you can imagine what might happen to your business. So start thinking about that now. And then we're going to talk about how you handled it or what you might say. And what I'm hoping is that everybody will be able to learn from each other. So so it'll be interactive. I'm going to be asking questions. I do have a PowerPoint that I'm about to turn on, but please interrupt or don't interrupt. Just let me know if you have any questions. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is what crisis communications is, identifying your communications team in the event something happens, like who are the people that you need to be able to reach, identifying what types of crises might happen to your business, who are your stakeholders, who do you need to contact, and then some general guidelines on messaging. I'll share some sample messages, communications tools, and then how do you analyze what happened. So it's a lot to cover in about 45 minutes. So again, interrupt me if we're going too fast. So a crisis is anything that has a potentially negative outcome that affects your organization or your products, your service. It could be something, one of your suppliers. One of your suppliers has a problem that affects you. It doesn't matter how big the organization is. You could be an organization of one or two, and this will still affect you. Obviously, big organizations, big corporations have staff to help handle it. When Tylenol, and I don't know who's old enough to remember when Tylenol had the big crisis when they had the tampering, they've got a legal department, a PR department, and all those things. So it's a lot. Even though it's a bigger crisis, it's easier probably for them to deal with than if you're a company of 2 or 5, because then it's all on you. They're also prepared for that. That's one of the things in big corporations like that. They anticipate something bad's going to happen. One of the things that's interesting with COVID is a really, really bad thing happened to all of us at the same time. But it was different. It was different for all of us. Some of us, were busy canceling events. Eric, so sorry. And others of us were having to reach out to patients. One of our clients is an orthopedic clinic, and most of their surgeries are considered non-essential, even though these people are in pain. So they had to reach out and let them know that they had to reschedule their surgeries. Huge crisis, right? Not as bad as obviously the places where people are actually dying, but there's different levels. So crisis can happen to any organization of any size. So what you want to do is you want to think ahead about who's your team. Like, who are the people, if something goes terribly, terribly wrong, who are you going to reach out to? Obviously the CEO, president, but what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have their information. What we used to do is we used to create like a contact card. It was almost like a index card that had the name, email, cell phone number. Now, just make sure they're all on your phone. Make sure that if something happens in the middle of the night, you find out that your company has flooded, can you reach your CEO at 2 o'clock in the morning? Only if you have to. Don't make a practice out of that. And then who are your spokespeople? Who are authorized to speak on the company's behalf? And hopefully you've trained them on how to do that. So they're not getting a call at 2 o'clock in the morning saying, hey, there's a flood. The wildfire is right up against our building. I need you to go talk to the press at 3 o'clock in the morning. If they've practiced, again, practice, preparation makes all of that so much easier, even if it does come out of the blue. You probably have a communications director or somebody who's in charge of that area. You're going to need your PR person, your website manager, social media. We're going to talk in a little bit because these are all the different ways you can communicate with your stakeholders. So you need to be able to reach everybody, and you need to have all of their information. If you're in charge of this, you need to have their information on your phone. If you have a communications director, have their information on your phone, and they have to be able to contact their people. And again, because if you're talking about updating people through social media, you need to be able to have who has the login to your Facebook page. May not be you. And so if it's somebody else, then you need to be able to get hold of them so that they can update. The next thing you want to think about are your stakeholders. Who is affected by the crisis? And when you're thinking about this and when you're planning, they're all going to be affected in a different way. So when you start talking about messaging, you're going to have a different message for each person. Your customers are going to need to hear something completely different than your creditors or your suppliers or your employees or your investors. They're all going to need something different. And so when you're thinking about this, and then obviously the general public, what's your message to the general public? And so as you start making this list, it could be a really long list of all the different people. Like for Eric, he's got obviously the participants in the RTO, but he also has all the different people who he has pulled permits from, or vendors or suppliers or the people who make the shirts. It's a lot of different groups, and they all care about something slightly different. Even the general public, the neighborhoods where people race through. For Dave, all of a sudden you're canceling events left and right. And it's the same thing. You've got to communicate with the people who are going to attend, but then also the facilities where you would book. Obviously, in this case with COVID, the Atlantis and the convention center, they knew that you were going to cancel, but you still have to do it. So it's like going through and making that list. Who do I need to contact? Something else to consider in this list are adversarial groups who do not like you, who may take this as an opportunity. So not necessarily that you need to communicate with them, but you need to be prepared for how they're going to take advantage of this situation. Yeah, Eric. You're on mute.
I know. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, and just one more group of stakeholders are sponsors.
Right.
Because we try to get the word out to some sponsors about our decisions to cancel events prior to even getting the word out to our participants. We didn't want the sponsors to hear secondhand, especially our bigger sponsors who make bigger contributions to support us.
That's a really good point, Eric. Thank you. And think about the order of things. Who needs to hear first? Because you don't want something going out on the media before your employees know, or before your investors. They may need to know first. So that's a really good point, is putting these groups in order of who needs to know first. Obviously your high level employees, your C-suite, they don't want to hear this on, I was looking at social media and see that we had a flood. But again, and all this sounds so obvious, every single thing I'm going to say sounds super obvious, but in the moment, in the crisis, it's really easy to forget. And this is why the importance of putting this all together in a plan, so that you can go, okay, this is bad. go pull up the paper and look at it. You know, have your checkoff list. What do we do next? So then you want to think about communications tools. So while you're making your list of contacts, your stakeholders, how do you contact them? Is it a phone call? Is it a text message? Is it an email? You know, and again, it depends on how fast they need to know. If you're reaching out to your C-suite, you know, maybe you do a group text so everybody's on the same chain, but maybe somebody else, it requires a phone call. And my assumption is, like with Eric, what you're talking about, the sponsors, I'm guessing all got a phone call. Participants in the race that got canceled got an email. So again, it just depends on, and think that through, try to put yourself in their shoes, how they would expect to be communicated with. Not that you can honor that for everyone, but try as much as you can. A lot of times, and a lot of people now use social media, which is super handy, that you can just go post something on Facebook or Twitter, but not everybody's going to get that message. So you need to make sure that you're in all the places. So if you're going to be closed for 2 days because you had a flood, make sure that your website reflects that. Make sure that your suppliers know that they can't do deliveries during that time, and that's a phone call. One of the things that I thought was interesting during COVID time is you would go on somebody's website to see if they were open. You know, it's like, well, can I go there? Can I order during, because you just assume everybody's closed when this first started. And some people's websites, like, they never changed them. They were the same websites as they always were. And so you're like, I think it doesn't help you. You know, it doesn't help you to know if they're open or not. So like some of our clients, even though they were not disrupted, they were totally fine through all this, we went and put a message across the top that said that. You know, we have COVID protocols in place. We are open. Come visit us, because the website not changing told them that, well, it doesn't tell you anything, right? And the same with social media. If you go look at somebody's social media site and you know there's been a big flood in Sparks that's affected a lot of companies down off of the river, but you go look at their social media and there's nothing on there about it, and you're like, are they okay? Are they not? And again, sometimes it's really easy just to say, it's not your business, we're handling it. But if there are stakeholders, it is their business, you know, make sure they know what they need to know. You know, if you've got a flood on your warehouse in Sparks, maybe the general public doesn't need to know that. Maybe the media doesn't need to know that. But your employees need to know, and your suppliers need to know. And sometimes, you know, sometimes media is the way that they find that out. Any thoughts on, like, what are other ways that you might communicate or that you have communicated? Okay. So let's talk about crisis. What has anybody, and I realize this is a very stupid question in the time of COVID, but has anybody experienced a crisis with your business in the last 5 years? And I would love it if you shared. Jody?
Oh, sorry. Was somebody else going to go?
No, you, Jody.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, a few years ago, Redfield campus, Redfield campus is a branch campus of UNR that's out on the Mount Rose Highway. There was a fire coming over the mountain, and we had an open house that night, so that was our crisis. But we have a great communications team at UNR, and I knew the protocol was to call Carrie and call UNR PD, and they took care of everything. But at the same time, over the years, one of the things we had done at Redfield is we cultivated relationships with the fire department and with the sheriff's office and some of the police to say, come use our space as a staging area, use our building when you have drills, to do searches on the weekends. So they're familiar with the space, and Redfield parking lot had become the staging area for any forest fires out in that area. So I knew, this sounds terrible, but if nothing else, Redfield wasn't going to burn. We're safe. So so it was great that they are aware of that location and kind of know the layout. And I felt like it made us a little bit more prepared in the event of a fire.
That's actually another good stakeholder group, both the emergency services, but also other groups that use your location. Mm-hmm. You know, if you use your break room for board meetings or different things like that, would be another stakeholder.
Yeah, we do. We have CERT trainings out there.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
Yep. This is Fred. A couple of years ago with the Reno Chamber Orchestra, we changed musical directors without much notice to anybody. And so we did some telephone calling of musicians, guest musicians from around the country and so on, but we didn't get to all of the people fast enough. And so we had some very irate local patrons that we had to work through some problems over a couple month period.
That's a perfect example. And I imagine with that, you know, just like with the RTO with Eric, people have ownership of your organization because they participate in it and
Yes.
they feel like they should have been told, right? These
Yes.
are people who, even they're season ticket holders, they don't want to hear this on the news,
Right.
right? Yeah, really, really good example. Eric, do you want to talk about yours?
Sure. You know, last year we had different degrees of crisis because we had to cancel our first race, the Leprechaun Race, literally just days before the race was going to happen. It was last year when mid-March, when we first started to deal with this, everything started to close down and we were having our race in, I was talking to the city every hour on Thursday, and the race was on Sunday and packet pickup was Friday and Saturday, and we were already in execution mode. So when I got the final call from the city at about 10:15, 10:30, I was saying everything's off this weekend. So we are obviously working on the fly. So we reached out quickly to some of the bigger sponsors, and then we got the word out. We had been, in fairness, if you know the crisis is coming to some degree, you can.
Mm-hmm.
We had put out a notice to all our runners earlier that week, I think, saying something like, we are monitoring the situation, things are fluid. So to the extent you can give them a little preemptive warning, build that into your system of communications, even in this crisis situation where we thought we were still gonna be okay. I think we'd given them a warning, but maybe we had it. Anyway, we had to then get the word out quickly through as many different ways we could, by email, by going through our social media, by putting it on our website, that event was canceled, and then saying we were going to come up with we got the first word out on Thursday, said, well, by tomorrow on Friday, we'll have the final plan as to whether we're going to have packet pickup and what we're going to do with all your shirts and all your goodies. And that was that. We then had to start dealing with the RTO last year, which was at the end of May. And at that time, we still thought for some reason it would be okay. Well, within a week, we realized everything is going bad. They're canceling the NCET tournament and canceling everything else in the world. And so we got the word out we started to send out emails to our runners saying, we aren't making a final decision yet, but we will get you another update in a week. So we gave them a day when we would get back to them. So if it was like March 23rd, we gave out the first email, we said, well, we'll put up another notice on March 30. And then we held ourselves to that. Even on March 30, we didn't know, but when we canceled like on April 3rd, so we again tried to just give them a heads up that we are working on this crisis, as everyone else was also trying to figure out their future plan. So it just really depends on how much time you have on if you can give a little bit, if you can work with your stakeholders, give them some notice that you're going to be making a decision. That we got a lot of credibility and a lot of goodwill by trying to keep everybody as informed as possible with our process.
That's a really good point, Eric. And even if it's like if it's a natural disaster, there's a fire or the river is starting to get higher, and people are worried about you. And even if it hasn't affected you yet, you know, just posting something on your social and just letting people know we're fine, and we're prepared to evacuate if we need to. I remember back in God, we had that giant flood when the Pioneer Center flooded downtown. And this is before mass texting and social, and just trying to get a hold of everybody and let them know what was going on was a lot harder than it is now. But again, you have, if you have an idea, let people know. So anybody else have a crisis they've had to deal with?
So Jackie, you got to live this one kind of firsthand with me. My former company had a series of high-level executives leave kind of all in a row. And we didn't really have a plan initially of what to do. We quickly, though, realized we needed the help of a professional PR firm for the messaging before the message got a hold of us and became something quite different with our competitors. But it was a lot of phone calls. Kind of like Fred said, we didn't get to everybody. We didn't get to everybody in time in some cases, and we had some upset clients that felt like they should have known first. But it was all hands on deck for weeks, trying to get the message out, and then B, trying to do some damage control.
Thank you for the softball to do an ad. You may want to hire an outside service to help you with your messaging. A lot of times somebody on the outside can see things that you don't see. Forest for the trees, right? You're in the thick of it, and they can help you identify things. And if they do, be nice to them. Because we have had situations where we were hired to go into a company and point out everything that could go wrong in their company. And they did not like what they heard. And it's a hard conversation sometimes, really hard conversation to have. But again, if you know ahead of time, you can fix it, right? If it's something that is you've got a rickety building and a contractor points that out to you, at least and you can fix it if you need to. Same with messaging. Having somebody else come in and identify what could go wrong is sometimes could be invaluable. Anybody had any financial crises where like you found out that your bookkeeper maybe wasn't on the up and up? Okay, so I had this one. I became the president of a nonprofit organization, and super excited about president of a nonprofit organization. But then you get in within like 3 months, found out that the former treasurer, who'd been treasurer for like 5 or 6 years, had been putting things down as like postage or something else. And during the course of those 5 or 6 years, it probably skimmed 20, 30 grand. It was a lot of money for this, and not just a nonprofit organization, professional organization. So when we found out, and again, looking back at that now, I should have handled things differently because we had not only the people who were members of the organization who'd been donating the money that was supposed to go to scholarships that was gone, but also like the founding members of the board or the founding members of the organization who had a vested interest. And when we talked about, we went to the police, we hired lawyers, and I was not prepared for that. What happened, and I had people contacting me, what are you doing? How could you go after her? She's a single mom, and we didn't have messaging prepared, and we should have been proactive about that. So that's something, and again, not something you think when you volunteer to be on a board that's going to happen. Or what about misconduct? You find out that somebody on your team has been sending text messages or pictures that they shouldn't be sending, or some other form of misconduct. Technology is a big one. You find out that you've been hacked and that they have stolen all of your customers' information, maybe their financial information. That's a big one. And that's a really big one right now because everybody's working at home. They're bringing their laptops home, and they're probably using residential Wi-Fi, not commercial. It's not a commercial, so it's going to have different levels of security. So that's something else to consider. What would you do if all of a sudden you found out somebody called you and said, hey, I was hacked, or my identity was stolen because of information they got from you? A social attack. One of the things that happens now, and everybody should be prepared for this, because if somebody decides that they don't like you, or this is a good one that I've also seen, not a good one, but and somebody on your team says something racist on social media or something sexist on social media, People get a hold of that, they screenshot it, they share it. Now everybody's outraged, right? And maybe rightly so that they're outraged, but they're going to take it out on your company. And they can spread the word really fast on social media. And, I've seen a lot in the last year because everybody's at home. They all, and people have time on their hands. And you can look at that and go, oh, this is a terrible company. And then they go and they start commenting on Yelp about your company. And they may not comment on Yelp about about this situation that somebody's racist. They may go on and say how the food is terrible or how the service is terrible because they're just trying to hurt you. So that's something else. And and you see it sometimes, these companies, they don't do anything about it. They just let it sit there like they think it's going to go away. You need to respond. If people are attacking you on social media, you need to go out and respond. And we're going to do some sample messaging later. But like in that situation, you have one rogue employee who's done something. You need to let people know that they don't represent your company, that kind of behavior is not acceptable. Workplace violence is another one that has become way too common. But, word gets out that there's, somebody on premises who has bad intentions. You need to alert people, and you need to alert them fast. And some of the things you see sometimes, and this is not a place to be coy, sending out a text message saying active shooter on the premises will keep you updated. It's like, what? What am I supposed to do about that information? And in a situation like that, it's, your neighbors. There's somebody with a gun on your premises. You need to tell the neighbors what to do. And obviously, a lot of times the police will handle that. But, tell me what's going on and then tell me what I'm supposed to do about it. And obviously, there's different levels of how much information you share. Like in the sexual harassment case, which I'll share on here, that's a human resources issue. There's only so much you're allowed to share. And on a lot of these, you are going to want, so one of the things that's nice about preparing this in advance is you can share it with the lawyers to make sure that the lawyers are all on board with what you plan to share. And they don't always agree with the PR people. We are not always on the same page on that. But you want to make sure that what you're saying is accurate. Any other stories? Anybody else want to share anything? Okay.
Jackie, I had a quick question. What happens, this cancel culture that seems pervasive in our society right now, where, I'm, 20 years ago, I was a much different person, and I may have said something
Right.
that I no longer believe in, or, my opinion has changed, but somebody brings it up, and it's a flashpoint, and I'm held accountable for that. And maybe the employer needs to react to that, and I lose my job. I mean, where's the line?
Well, I mean, I'm not in charge of the lines, but that's a really good question. You need to speak up. You need to own it. If it's something that you did 20 years ago that you are embarrassed by, that you would not say today, say that. I said this thing and I shouldn't have, and it's not how I believe. Sometimes, unfortunately, the PR move for the employer is to fire. If it's a really strong hot point and especially though, if the person doesn't seem remorseful, if they're just like, yeah, I said it, no big deal. What? They need to lighten up. Really easy solution is to fire that person. If you own it, I'm sorry, you guys, and this in your personal lives, how powerful the words I'm sorry are. Look at your personal relationship. Somebody is upset with you and you say, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have done that. All the wind's out of their sails. It's like over, right? But if you argue, if you fight back, obviously it just prolongs it. So unfortunately, Rich, one of the challenges now is technology, and people can go back and look. And I'm sure that we've all said things that we shouldn't have said, and we've all posted pictures we shouldn't have posted. But one of the things I saw, there was a food restaurant from up at the lake. The owner had said some racist things on social. And the Black Lives Matter went up there. A bunch of people went up there and they were protesting in her right in front in her parking lot. It was a small company, small parking lot. And they were protesting. And she went out there and talked to them and had a very rational conversation with them and heard what they were upset about, apologized. I'm assuming her apology was sincere, I hope, but they settled it. You know, there's a lot of power in a conversation. So anything else? Any other examples? Because you guys are bringing up really good examples.
I'll just throw out that Gary Chapman, who's famous for the 5 love languages, wrote a second book on 5 languages of apology.
Oh, that's good.
Because not everybody hears the same thing. I'm sorry doesn't go over with a lot of people. So there's 5. He suggested 5 steps to that, and that might be something that people in cases like something that was said a long time ago. How do I set the record straight today?
It's a really good point, Fred. And that's a whole other presentation, is how to apologize. But I'm sorry you were upset, or I'm sorry you feel that way, is not the way, right? Because that's putting it on them. If you're sorry for what you said, you need to own it. I'm sorry for what I said. You know, I don't feel that way anymore. But yeah, people do hear things differently. And they also hear things differently, again, if you, in a text message as opposed to a phone call. You know, again, you know, and there's a whole presentation on how to communicate. But if you're texting somebody or you're emailing 3 times and you're not figuring it out, you're not getting to the same page, pick up the phone. They can hear it in your voice and you can work through it pretty fast. And it's really interesting how reluctant people are to pick up a phone now these days. It's like they would rather do anything else than call somebody. But you've all done it, right? You call somebody and you're done in a minute. You figure it out because you use the right tool. So when you're working on your messages, there's some things to remember. You want to be open and accessible and as honest as you possibly can. Obviously, if you don't want to give away trade secrets, you don't want to throw people under the bus, you know, if it's an HR issue, but you want to be as honest as possible. People will figure it out if you're lying. If you're flat out lying, they'll figure it out and it's going to be worse. And we've all watched enough movies to know that the cover up is almost always worse than the actual act, right? So be as honest as you can. Be compassionate and be empathetic. And this is the part where the PR people and the lawyers will fight, because we're all about the people. You know, we have the word relations in our name, in our title. We're all about putting myself, if there's a fire, what's a better example? If somebody is hurt, like if a customer is hurt by something that my company has done, I have to be able to put myself in their shoes and figure out what is it going to take to help them. And the lawyers a lot of times will want to do the corporate, you know, all the blah, blah words. You know, use the words. We're so sorry that this happened. And now here's what we're going to do to fix it. People respond. People do business with people. And you'll find a lot of times you could have, like, you have a company that's just done something they really messed up, but they fix it in a compassionate, empathetic way. And it, you know, it helps. It's like now all of a sudden, I mean, this is a very small example, but I was in a restaurant, you know, back in the old days when you could eat in restaurants. And I had some bad service, like really bad service, really, really bad service. And I put it on the comment card. You know, this is before social, and I don't attack people on Yelp just on policy, but I put it on the comment card. And I got a call from the manager apologizing to me and telling me what they were going to do to fix it to make it better next time. And it was like, I liked that restaurant better than I had when I went in there the first time. You also see it on reviews, like on Yelp or something like that. If somebody comes on and complains about you on the review site, and if you take the time to respond and fix it or make it better, or even just let them know that they were heard, other people see that. So even if you don't fix it with them, other people will see that and go, oh, they're responsive.
Jackie, I worked for Viacom Cable TV for years and years and years. And we did some research that found, because cable TV didn't always have a great reputation. And we did some research and found that if somebody had a problem with the cable TV and it got fixed, they had a better opinion of Viacom than people who had never had a problem.
Well, absolutely. And the other thing to remember is sometimes when people have a problem, they don't tell you. You know, they're just off telling all their friends who are telling 5 friends. That's one of the things I look at, like Yelp, even like negative reviews. Thank you for telling us, right? Because now you at least know that they're upset. So whether or not they're justifiably upset, you can do something about it. If they're just off telling everybody how terrible you are, you don't even know most of the time. And then the other thing is, like, as I'm saying, you know, thank you for telling us we're going to fix it. You also have to be careful not to overpromise, not to over reassure. You know, thank you for letting us know that this person, you know, is a sexual harasser. We're going to go through our company one by one and talk to every single person to make sure that they know that this never happens again, right? Nothing I just said is realistic. None of that is realistic. So you need to be aware of what actually can be done and say that. You know, the whole overpromise, what is it? Underpromise, overdeliver. You know, we're going to look at our company, we're going to reevaluate the way these things are done, and then report back, type of thing. If you don't know the answer, it's fine to say you don't know the answer. If a reporter comes up to you and says, we have heard that, we have heard that your systems have been hacked and 100,000 people's identities have been stolen. And you can say, we know we have an issue, but I don't know the answer to that. Let me look into it and I will get back to you, right? Don't guess. Don't say, well, I don't think it was 100,000. I think it might've been like 70,000. And then you find out later it's 500,000, you know, and then you look like a liar, right? So it's like, just, if you don't know the answer to the question, just say, I don't know. I know this is frustrating. I don't have the answer. Let me find out, get back to you. And then get back to them. So a lot of times somebody will say, I don't know the answer, I'll get back to you. And then the reporter leaves them alone. They're like, whew, dodge that, right? It's not like the reporter's just gonna go off and never come back and ask you again. And if they can't get the answer from you, they're gonna get it from somebody else. And if they get it from somebody else, it might not be the answer you want. So, you know, if somebody does come at you with a hard question, let them know, I don't know the answer, I'm gonna find out, I'm gonna get back to you, and then get back to them. And then the other big part of this, and this kind of goes along with that, the sorry language, Fred, is how are we going to learn from this situation? You know, because it's one thing to say, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that this happened. Well, then what? You know, those are just words. I'm sorry that this happened, and here's what we're going to do about it to make sure it doesn't happen again. Again, without overpromising. Here's what we've learned. Here's what we're going to do. And this is one that Eric mentioned, if you are aware of future negative outcomes, mention those. You know, when they reached out, I don't know if they did this because they got no notice on the Leprechaun Race. But, you know, this race is being canceled because of COVID. There is a chance that the next race might get canceled as well. So people can plan. Again, this is why you want to write these messages ahead of time, because you want to be very careful, because people will misunderstand you too. So you want to have a time to look at the words and see what they say and think about how they're being interpreted, right? Let's see. Oh yeah, be regretful, but not defensive. So it's, you know, like the woman at the restaurant up at the lake with Black Lives Matter, if she had come out there or gone on media, I can't believe these people have come up here and they're doing this and they don't even know what I have to deal with, blah, blah, blah. Like, how does that sound to you as a potential customer? You don't believe, you know, you don't believe her. but it's like, I am so sorry that this happened. You know, own it, own it. And you know what? The thing is, you're going to feel defensive because sometimes you're going to feel attacked and sometimes you're going to be attacked for something that you didn't do or that's not real. And this is the part where, again, where it's so important to have a plan and to practice so that you can, you know, so that you can respond appropriately. One of our jobs is to, we respond on social media to our clients on their social media accounts. So when people come on and complain or they have questions, we respond to those on their behalf. And sometimes the things that people say to you are just, you know, because it's online and they say what they want. And sometimes they're just mean when they say things. And I found that you go on there and you're like, you know what? Thank you for bringing this to our attention. Here's the answer. What else can I do for you? And they're like, oh, well, thank you. Thank you very much. And you can just almost see them physically backing away from the keyboard because you acknowledge they were upset about something. They might not have been upset legitimately with you, but you fixed it. Or maybe they were. You know, we had one that just happened where somebody wanted a website. And I went and I posted, here's the website, here's where you go. And he's like, that website doesn't work, blah, 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 you're all idiots, you know, all caps thing. And I went and I looked at it and I was like, you know what, you're right, the website doesn't work. I'm so sorry. Thank you for letting me know. We'll work on that. In the meantime, what can we do to help you? You know, what do you need from the website that we can just do for you here? So, and he backed down because we acknowledged his struggle and his, what he was upset about, which goes along with, you know, acknowledging their fears. Don't, you know, and again, we know this as we get older is don't tell people how to feel. You know, don't be afraid, kind of implying sometimes that they're stupid to be afraid. You know, people feel how they feel. They're afraid, they're frustrated, they're angry. Acknowledge it and try to fix it and then move on rather than telling them to quit feeling that way. You can also do, you know, I wish we knew more. I wish our answers were more definitive. As we know more, we will share more. And again, who you're sharing with and what you're sharing depends on the situation and who your stakeholders are. I'm not saying, I know I'm using a lot of examples what's media, but I'm not suggesting that you have to tell the media everything that just went on with your company. But you need to tell the people who it affects, you know. And that's the other reason not to lie and don't to make things up, because they're probably going to tell somebody else, which may or may not be the media. So you need to be consistent with what you're saying to people so that if you tell one employee something and you tell another employee something else and tell your customer something else and then tell your stakeholder or your investor something else, and they talk and they're like, oh, well, they're lying to somebody, you know, and you're just not sure who it is. In the situation with the board I was on where we had the bookkeeper who was embezzling, it was not our goal to go out and badmouth her. But there were certain people who needed to know more than other people. And so we made sure that they did. And when we got legal involved, and it's like a lawyer's going to be reaching out to talk to you about this, you know, nobody wants a lawyer call without warning. But that was different information than we needed to tell the general membership. So now I'm going to show some examples of messaging. So, you know, just a general mishap. We owe our customers an apology. On April 15th, this thing happened. As a result of that happening, this other thing happened. After reviewing the situation, we found out the cause to be. We've taken the following steps to ensure this doesn't happen again. Our HR department has been communicating with our employees. Our sales managers communicating with our customers, and they will continue to keep them updated. Right, so you're not necessarily promising that you're going to tell the media everything, but that you're saying we're going to keep the people who are affected by this updated. If the media asks you for an update, you know, you should honor that, but you don't have to promise that. Sexual harassment case. We cannot comment on ongoing litigation, but we wish to emphasize that this company is committed to providing a safe and inclusive workplace for all employees. We thank the person who displayed the courage to speak out. We'll be working with them to offer support during this time. You know, and again, this is one that could be really easy to get defensive on. You know, if you come out and you say, well, she's a rabble rouser and she complains all the time and she can't even take a joke, right? That's not what people want to hear. They want to hear that you're taking it seriously. And even if the person is all of those things and she can't take a joke and she is a pain in your butt, you know, you don't want to say that. You don't want to say that to anybody. We take this seriously, and we thank that person for having the courage to tell us. And the thing that's on this one, it's ongoing litigation. It's also an HR issue. So there's only so much you can share. You don't want to share details of what happened or what was said, but you want to share that you're taking it seriously and you're going to do something about it. Workplace violence. Hopefully nobody ever has to do this one, because this is terrible. There's suspicion of a threat on our premises, where our priority is the safety of everyone on site and surrounding areas. We're communicating, working with authorities. Stay away from the company until they say it's safe to do so. And I am going to give this PowerPoint to Dave, so you'll be able to have these samples of it. But again, these are all very, very general. You're going to want to look at your specific situations and have specific answers. This is one that I think we actually had two. Fred and Clay had both mentioned this, where you have a high-level person is all of a sudden gone, right? And there are people who need to know, well, what happened? And that one is the worst, because there's all the gossip starts, right? Well, what happened? Were they asked to leave, or what happened? This person has resigned from their position effective this date. So-and-so is going to assume the position. We believe this transition. We wish them nothing but the best. And obviously, this is if they quit unexpectedly. If they're asked to leave, or if somebody dies, it's going to be a different answer. But it goes back to those things. It's, be empathetic, be compassionate, be a person as you're writing this. And I don't know if we have any lawyers on the call. And let me just emphasize, I love lawyers. I think they're awesome. We just approach things from a different way. And if you can get on the same page as the lawyers, where you're working on this together, that's the best. But we are going to come at them from different ways, different language. Somebody says something bad and that you need to apologize for, or the company does something bad. Maybe the company, I don't know, they're dumping garbage into the river, and somebody finds out. And I'm going on the assumption on this that we all run good, clean companies that would never do that on purpose, right? But say one of your employees does something. We're committed to being safe and inclusive. We're assessing the situation and the accusations. We want to understand what happened. Next step is going to work with whoever to determine the best course of action. One thing also, depending on the level of this, is most media now, they're busy. Media used to be, you had a reporter and a camera person and somebody who does their hair and their makeup. Now it's one person. It's one person with a camera out there covering a story. Probably 6 months later, they're not going to come back and ask you what happened, unless it's really bad and affected a lot of people. But you should be prepared for them too. You don't want to get caught off guard and just say, oh, well, they didn't call me the next day, so we're done. We don't have to worry about it. Be prepared. Natural disaster. The wildfire or the flood has affected our company in this way. We've taken the following precautions. We've put bags up on the riverside to protect us from flooding. We've sent except for our essential employees home, whatever it is. We're communicating, working with authorities. So these are just some samples, but again, just think about your specifics and write, and you're not going to know, right? If you write a statement for natural disaster, you don't know if it's a flood or a fire or, wind that's messing up your event, or COVID. Nobody could have predicted that. And now all of us are experts on that. So you just write general, and then if it happens, you You get more specific. So then, as with any plan, you want to evaluate the plan. So after the event, something bad happened, you addressed it. You want to go and assess that. You know, did we respond quickly? Did we share the right information with the right stakeholders? Were we sincere? Were we honest? Were we humble? Did we own the mistake? And be harsh on yourself, you know, and make sure that you're asking the right people, because it's very easy for someone to say, oh, you're great, you're wonderful. That's not helpful. You know, there's almost always something that can be done to improve. And then the big thing is refresh the plan. Don't just make the plan, put it in a binder, put it on the shelf and say, okay, we're done, we're good. We're prepared for any situation. Look at it, you know, every 6 months or once a year, look at it and make sure that it's still current. And make sure that your crisis team, your communications team knows what's in there and that they're prepared. And make sure that if you have, you know, your communications team that we talked about at the beginning, and you go back and you look at this 6 months later and half those people don't work for you anymore, you need to have a new training. And you need to make sure somebody has a login for your Facebook and your YouTube and your website, and that you're not having to call a former employee in the middle of the night asking them to do this for you, because they probably don't want to. Practice, and then address the problem areas. So we have 5 minutes left for questions, and I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so that I can see you.
Jackie, something that's obviously very relevant right now. Say somebody went on social media and says, I just got COVID-19 and I'm sure I got it by visiting a retailer or attending an NCET event. How do you respond to that?
So, and again, your instincts would be to say, no, that didn't happen, right? But you don't know, maybe it did.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing this to our attention. We're evaluating. We'll let you know what we find out. But you can also talk about in there the precautions you're taking. You know, every NCET event, people are required to wear masks. We have social distancing. Here's all the precautions we've taken. We're sorry for the, how would you do this? We're sorry that this person is sick, right? You don't want to diminish that. We're sorry that this person is sick. We will evaluate and see if it happened here, but here's all the precautions we've taken to ensure that that doesn't happen. So that type of thing. And again, that's something that's really easy to dismiss the person. No, it didn't. They're not sick. They're just coughing, right? That's not a big deal, right? You know, and people, you know, it's one of the hardest parts. And I think especially, I'm very concerned about post-COVID when we all get back, well, not post-COVID, post-shutdown, we get back out in the world again and have to interact with people. But just being super aware of how people are, you know, and acknowledging and honoring that. Anything else? Tim, did you have something?
So I don't know if it's an easy one to answer, but is it less expensive for a business to do this pre-planning as compared to, oh man, now I'm facing this challenge and I have to outsource it?
I think you know the answer to that question. And I appreciate the softball. It's always cheaper to plan ahead of time. And it's just like insurance. You know, you don't want to buy insurance. You spend money on insurance and maybe you never use it, right? But boy, if you need it, it's sure a good thing that you have it, or your lawyers. You know, and this is why I love lawyers, because I've been in a position where I've had to have lawyers. Having them involved at the beginning is going to save you so much more money than at the end. And something like this, planning for crisis before it's a crisis, is reasonable. It's a reasonable cost. If you call a PR firm because you're in the middle of a sexual harassment suit, or you find out there's something that's going on, those prices go way up. Because crisis rates are way higher than crisis planning rates. Because a lot of times what has to happen, and lawyers too, you have to drop everything else you're doing to go focus on this. So the company has to pay, you know, you have to make it worth their while to do that. So absolutely you want to pay ahead of time. And I'm not saying you have to pay somebody else to do it. You can probably do it yourself. But there is definitely advantage having a set of outside eyes. Okay, well, thank you. This was very much fun, and I am bummed that it's on Zoom, that we don't get to do this in person, but soon, very soon.
Yes.
Thanks, Jackie. That was awesome. I wish we had you here a year ago. Checking off these things I wish I knew.
Right? Well, I mean, the thing that's nice, again, about COVID is we were all in the same situation, at the same time. We were talking about this. There was a time where you would not have been caught dead in a business meeting with your dog on your lap or your baby on your lap or crying, right? And everyone's like, yeah.
I know.
And we all have it, right? We're all going through the same thing at the same time. That makes this crisis easier. Even with we were talking before about the second shot. Oh, I'm getting a second shot on Wednesday, so I can't meet with you on Thursday. Everyone knows what that means.
Well, Jackie, thank you very much. That was wonderful, and clearly based on the all the involvement of the people here today, you were fascinating.
Well, good. I'm glad. And I think, I'll send out the PowerPoint. I'll get this to you, Dave. It has my contact information on there. So if you have questions, just let me know.
Excellent.